Alma's stories. Rohisia led Alma through the maze of the castle, and Alma wondered, winding down yet another hallway, how long it would take her to untangle the architectural riddles of this place. At last they came to the great hall which glowed in candlelight. A vast black iron chandelier hung above the expensive wooden table, bare except for candles. The candles above and below dipped and swayed, throwing shadows on the walls around. Sitting at the table just to the right of its head was the Queen Mother, like Alma. She was dressed in red, though her hair was perhaps more suited for the color, jet black as it was, with streaks of white at the temples. And at her elbow stood Emery, clean now and dressed in finery, but with the same easy white smile, the same dark curls, washed and worn loose. He was tall and fine and cut a handsome figure standing there, waiting for Alma. At the sight of him, Alma felt her mouth part into a smile, for it was a relief to see his familiar face in this strange place, and the way his eyes lit up with pleasure upon seeing her made Alma feel glad for the care Tilly had taken with her gown and hair. "Alma," he said upon her entrance, "what a sight you are!" He strode across the hall and took up Alma's hands, kissing them both, one and then the other. He smelled better, too, Alma noticed. "Hello," she said, and dropped a curtsy, one quite better than her earlier attempts. She seemed to be a quick study, Alma thought about herself. "And you've put aside your cat," Emery said, sounding particularly pleased. "Only just for dinner," Alma corrected. "Tilly, one of the girls who tended me, is with her." Emery laughed loud at this. "Did you hear that, Mother? A nursemaid for her cat." "I would do the same for my favorite pets," the Queen Mother said. "It is no surprise at all to me." Still holding Alma by the hand, Emery led her across the hall and to the table. There he presented her to his mother. "May I present the Lady Alma," he said formally, "the damsel I have rescued from the dragon I conquered in a land far away and grey as dusk." But dusk wasn't grey, Alma thought. Dusk was almost a colourful hour, with the horizon set on fire by the breath of the yawning sun. She did not say this, however. She had better sense than that, and instead dropped another curtsy, this time bowing deep and lowering her gaze as well. "Queen Mother," she said, "thank you for the lovely gown. I hope you are pleased by how it looks on its grateful recipient." "Come closer, girl," the Queen Mother said, and Alma obeyed. Emery dropped her hand, and she walked alone to the Queen Mother's side. "Look at me," the Queen Mother said, and Alma did. The Queen Mother looked back, and each studied the other. Alma did not know what the Queen Mother saw, but in the Queen Mother's face Alma saw great cliffs and bright clusters of jewels and streamed over rose gold mirrors. Then she blinked hard and looked again, and then she saw an elegant matron, still beautiful, with black eyes and thin pale lips, her face all eye and eyebrow and forehead and hair. Alma curtsied again. "Enough of that," the Queen Mother said, and gestured to the chair across from her, at Emery's left hand. "Sit," she said, and Alma sat. The Queen Mother snapped her fingers, and the servants, whom Alma had not noticed, came alive, pouring wine into goblets, trimming the candle wicks along the table's spine. Another servant, this one a girl no older than Alma, uncovered the dishes lining a side table, and a tall, dour-faced man, candle-like both in waxiness of his features and the long, thin shape of him, brought the first dish to the table. "May I serve their majesties?" he asked. "Serve the ladies first," Emery told him. The candle man bowed his head and did as he was ordered, laying a slice of meat on the Queen Mother's silver plate, and then another slice on Alma's. A parade of servants came to the table, each adding a portion of another dish to Alma's plate. She watched the food pile in front of her until at last they stopped. There was so much food on the plate that Alma felt slightly ill just looking at it, so instead of eating she raised her goblet and sipped the wine, which warmed her throat and then her chest with each swallow. "Slowly," Emery warned kindly, "or you will regret it on the morrow." They ate. It was a long, wide table for just the three of them to sit, and as Alma gazed at all the vast empty space, all the unseated chairs, Emery said, "Tomorrow the hall will be full as it usually is, but this is your first night in the castle, and Mother desired to have you all to ourselves, when the rest of the cottage court gets their claws on to you." The Queen Mother said, a piece of meat and her fork. "They may never let go. Better we speak first and learn what you know of yourself before they try to wrest it from you." "I told you, Mother," Emery said, with an air of exasperation, as if he had already explained this to her several times. "Alma knows nothing of her time before her rescue." "Do not begrudge me the chance to hear from the girl herself," the Queen Mother said to Emery and then to Alma. "Well?" Alma swallowed. "Well, what?" she said loudly. It was impertinent and unexpected, and perhaps brought on by the quick draught of the wine, but as soon as the words were out, Alma wished she could take them back. It was as if a window had blown open and brought inside a freezing draught, icing everyone into stillness. The servants stopped where they stood. Emery paused mid-bite. Even the candles seemed to cease their flicker. And then the Queen Mother laughed, a loud, triumphant sound, warmer than Alma would have guessed her capable of. Cheeky, she said, and lifted her goblet, raised it in Alma's direction. I like that. She drank deeply, and set her cup back with a clatter. Well, she started again, what do you remember of your time in the dragon's possession? And the time before that, child? Alma cast herself back. There were colors, and there was light. And warmth. Oh, such lovely warmth. But that was all there was. Now there was this man who had rescued her, who looked after her with such gentle attentiveness, this queen mother with the audacious, wonderful laugh. Here food, more than enough food and pleasant drink, warm clothes upstairs, her links, a warm bed waiting for her, a fire all her own, in a room all her own. It was enough, Alma thought. It would have to be. I remember nothing, she told the queen mother. I will need new stories, I suppose. Then, my dear, the queen mother said, we shall help you to make them. And she raised her goblet once more, and Alma raised hers, and Emery too raised his. The queen mother said, 2 new stories. And the 3 goblets met with a clang, and together they drank to the future. When the dinner dishes were removed and a spread of sweets was set before them, the queen mother addressed the question that Alma had been silently harboring, as she intuited that a bit of sugar would help Alma swallow what was to come. Now, the queen mother said, spearing a sugared berry as she spoke, we have weddings to plan. Alma, too, had a selection of delicacies on her gilded plate, but she set her fork quietly down and folded her hands in her lap. And before the wedding, the coronation, Emery said. I have, after all, returned home with the damsel, having felled the dragon. Indeed, my son, the queen mother said, you are a king. That is certain. We must waste no time in announcing it. After all, it has been more than a month since the last king has left this world, and the people deserve to know that Harding is under protection of a new one. The arrangements have been made already, Emery, for the morrow. At this, Emery's eyes widened. You arranged the coronation ceremony in my absence? Of course, the queen mother said. But if I hadn't returned, that is not a thought a mother entertains, interrupted the queen mother, as if even the idea of Emery failing to return to the castle was too bitter to consider. You returned home to Harding as a king, having earned your position as tradition dictates, and you shall be celebrated as such without delay. Emery reached across and took his mother's hand, squeezed it. Alma watched as her mother and son shared a deep, long gaze, each one's love for the other writ clear upon their faces. She was, Alma felt, both at the table and entirely invisible. It was through Emery's rescue of her rescue of her from the dragon, that he was now to be crowned king. But in this moment, Alma wondered if she could have been anyone at all, and the plates spread on the table would still be heavy with the same sugared fruits and dishes of cream. Alma was, she saw, both terrifically important and terribly insignificant in equal measures at exactly the same time. When she looked up from her plate, it was to find that the queen mother had shifted her gaze from Emery to Alma. Gone was the gentle gaze of mother love, replaced by something else, something sharper. Dear girl, the queen mother said, tomorrow you shall see our Emery crowned king, and in less than 2 months, at midwinter solstice, you shall become his queen. What do you think of that? It is a wonder, said Alma. Truly it is. Indeed, said the queen mother, and she picked up her glass goblet by its delicate stem. She held it before a candle and twirled it, gazing into the glistening red wine. It is dizzying, the wonder of it all. She brought the goblet to her lips and drained it. A servant was at her elbow before the cup had reached the table, and she poured another long stream of wine. I do hope, though, Alma said, choosing her words carefully, that perhaps some search can be made for my family, so they might know of my fate. Emery cleared his throat as if to speak, but the queen mother had laid her hand on his arm. Your family, said the queen mother. Well, said Alma, there must be someone after all. That is to say, everyone comes from a mother and a father, do they not? Surely someone somewhere is anxious to hear of my safe escape from the dragon, just as you are anxious to see your son safely home. Dear girl, said the queen mother firmly, you have no family. No family, Alma said, her throat closing. Why do you say that? The dragons, they do not take girls with families. The queen's mother's face was gentle, sympathetic. Emery didn't tell you? Alma shook her head. He should have, the queen mother said, frowning briefly at her son, so that you wouldn't have false hopes. It is kinder that way. It is true, Alma, Emery said now, leaning in toward Alma. The damsel never has kin, it is known. By whom? Alma asked, but she felt in her bones the truth of his words. By all, said the queen mother, as if that settled the matter. And it did. But we shall be your people, Emery said, and he laid his warm hand gently atop Alma's. As he did, servants appeared with still more food, laying a plate of ripe plums before them. In 7 weeks' time my son shall be your husband, and he shall give you a son. That is all the family should need." The Queen Mother said, "7 weeks," Emery echoed, picking up a plum and with a burst of juice biting into its red flesh. 7 weeks to learn the ways of harding, the ways of the castle, and the ways of a queen. 7 weeks, then, before the year's shortest day, the year's longest night. Alma's throat felt tight and dry. She lifted her glass, such a lovely glass, she noticed, and drank it. Alma's visitor. It was well past midnight when Alma was returned to her room. Tilly was there, as she had promised, sitting in the chair where Alma had sat for the styling of her hair. Perhaps Tilly had been asleep, for when Alma entered, led by Rohicia, she stood quickly as if startled into wakefulness. The lynx lay still curled on the hearthrug, and Alma's entrance did not disturb her in the least. Alma noticed that someone had fetched a box of sand and placed it in a corner for Sorrow to use. "My lady," said Tilly, dropping into a curtsy. "Thank you for staying with Sorrow," Alma said. "I rested easy, knowing she was in your care." "Pay it no concern, my lady," Tilly said, though now Alma wondered if Tilly had missed her supper because of the assignment. But when she asked, Tilly shook her head and said, "It's kind of you to worry, but I have no needs." Alma thought it was an odd way of saying that she was not hungry. Then Rohicia set to building up the fire, and Sorrow stared at the new warmth of it, stretching her legs and yawning, her sharp kitten teeth white against the pinkness of her tongue. Tilly helped Alma out of her gown and undressing and into a thin, pale chemise. She took down Alma's hair and arranged it into a simple plait, and then turned back the covers and furs for Alma to climb into bed. Oh, such luxury to climb into a warm bed heated by stones, tucked between the sheets. Oh, such luxury to rest her head on a bolster, to watch Tilly unfasten and close the curtains of the canopy. Sorrow leaped prettily to the foot of the bed just before Tilly lowered the final curtain, and she said crossly, "Out of the mistress's bed, you beast." But Alma reached out and stroked the cat. "Leave her," she said, and Tilly pursed her mouth as if she wanted to argue, but here in her chamber it was clear that Alma was in charge, and so Tilly did not protest. "Sweet dreams, lady," she said, dropping the curtain and leaving the room. Alma was alone for the first time since ever, as far as time mattered. With no memories of before, all Alma had were the days where Emery and this evening at the castle. To be by herself in a safe and comfortable bed, with only Sorrow for company, felt like a great relief. It was as if for the first time she could recall no one was watching her. And what would Alma do with his first secret freedom? She pulled Sorrow up from where she lay in the crook of Alma's knees, wrapped her arms around the lynx's warm soft pelt, and sobbed into her neck, the kid lapping up her tears with her rough tongue. Alma wept, until at last she fell asleep. Alma did not hear the turn of the knob. She did not hear the creak of the door pushed open. She did not hear the footsteps across the floorboards of her room. But when the bed curtain was pulled back with a whisper of cloth just near her head, that Alma did hear. She woke, breath trapped in her throat, a sick roll of her stomach, room spinning in the dark. From fear or wine, Alma did not know. At her side, still clutched in her arms, Sorrow growled, a low and dreadful sound. "Call off your guard, Alma," said Emery's voice. "It is I." Alma stroked Sorrow's pelt, and though some part of her felt that perhaps Sorrow's warning was not unwarranted, she hushed the cat until the growling stopped. "Make room for me," Emery said, and Alma shifted over in her bed so that Emery could sit down beside her. She raised herself up onto her elbows and would have sat fully erect but for Emery's insistent hand on her shoulder pinning her there, and then his insistent mouth slashing down across her own. His mouth was hot and wet and open, and tasted of the evening's wine and meat. Underneath the weight of him, his mouth his first, then his chest across hers, pressing Alma back into the mattress. Alma felt breathless and trapped, as if she had been submerged under water. This had felt like her own room earlier in the evening, but now it was clear that the room, and everything it contained, including Alma herself, was the property of the castle, and of Emery as master of it. Only her one hand, which rested still on Sorrow's back, felt like Alma's own. The rest of her became part of the landscape of the room, her lips pressed into Emery's teeth, her hair torn from its neat plait by his desperate hand, her breast when he shifted his weight up and slipped his hand down her from her head to her chest, pulling apart the ribbons of her chemise, spreading open the cloth, and finding her bare skin beneath. His hand squeezed her flesh as if he would try to make something from it, and the calluses of his palm rubbed across her nipple, causing it to harden, which Alma noticed as if watching from some distance, rather than from within the very skin he handled. But when Emery tugged up at the hem of Alma's shift, bunching its fabric at her waist, and running his hand first across the downy nest of hair between her legs, and then pushing his fingers inside of her, opening there in a way that she had not known she could be opened, Sorrow growled once more. This time Alma loosened her fingers from the lynx's pelt, a silent permission to do what Alma could not. Wild now, the lynx arched her back and hissed, eyes glowing in the last of the fire. Her claws were black talons, and she stretched them menacingly, lips pulled back from her fangs. Sorrow was dangerous and feral, Emery's hand froze, fingers knuckle-deep in Alma, and then slowly he withdrew it, leaving her bruised and undone. Emery cleared his throat, lifted himself from the bed, and arranged his yard, which stood in his trousers, hard and demanding. "Forgive me," he said, to Alma, or to sorrow, she did not know. "I am addled by the wine and your presence here in my castle. There will be time after solstice for such things." And he bowed, and he dropped the bed curtain, and he turned for the door. But before he left the room, he said one more thing. "By our wedding night, Alma, that creature will be gone." Tilly's aunt. When Alma awoke again, it was to the sounds of the ladies in her room. The fire was built back up, the bed curtains pulled open. Tilly was there, and Alma was glad to see her freckled face. It was Tilly who offered Alma the chamber pot, though it was Rohesia who took it away after. A girl who had helped serve at dinner the night before brought Alma a tray for the kitchen. Her face, unlike Tilly, was not open to Alma, eyes downcast. Surly-mouthed, she delivered the tray to Alma's bed with apathetic duty. When she put it in Alma's lap, the hot morning drink splashed out of its cup. "Take care, Fabiana," Tilly reprimanded. "My apologies," Fabiana said, with a quick curtsy, and Alma could tell was clearly perfunctory. "That girl," Tilly said, mopping up the spilled beverage. "Don't pay her any mind. She seems unhappy," Alma said. Tilly looked as if she might say more, but instead she pushed the tray to Alma and said, "Eat while you can, lady. We have a day in front of us. We do." And so they did. Much of the morning was spent pulling on and taking off various gowns for the coronation, while Tilly took measurements and Rohesia took notes. There were half a dozen of them, plus undressings and underdressings and a cloak and cape as well. Alma gave herself over to Tilly's practiced hands, and she thought, as Tilly fastened up the final gown, that she much preferred having her body touched like this, in a detached and utilitarian manner, to the way Emery had touched it the night before. She obligingly held up her arms as Tilly checked the gown's fit, turned this way and that as Tilly measured the hem. "Do you prefer this gown or the last?" Tilly asked. "The last," Alma said. "It was looser in the chest. I could breathe more easily." "That is not what I meant," Tilly said. "Which gown do you prefer the look of? Which do you think it was more becoming?" "Oh," said Alma, "I have no preference about that. Whichever you think, I am sure." Tilly smiled. "My aunt told me that the Queen Mother had no preferences of this sort either when she first came to the castle, but she learned she did, and now she is well known for her sharp eye about what flatters her best. You will be the same, I wager, in time." This caught Alma's attention. What was it that the Queen Mother had said last night at dinner? That Emery had rescued a damsel from a dragon, and earned his position as tradition dictates. That meant that the Queen Mother herself must have once been a damsel as well. "Tilly," Alma said, "tell me more about the Queen Mother." "Well, she wasn't born here, of course. She was like you, saved from a dragon, rescued by the king." Tilly's tongue was loosened by her attention to her work. Bending to measure, calling out to Rohesia, standing, turning Alma, measuring again. All kings, far back as our memory goes, are made the same way. The prince must venture alone away from Harding. He must find a dragon, he must conquer the dragon and free the damsel from captivity. When he returns home with his prize, he has proven himself worthy of the crown and is made king. "Tell me," Alma said, waiting to hear the answer from Tilly. "Did the Queen Mother have any people? People who knew her before she was taken by the dragon, who came to Harding to celebrate her rescue and her marriage to the king?" Tilly stopped her work, straightened, and frowned. "Oh, no," she said. "The damsel never has people, you know, until she is a wife and then a mother, and it is her very son whose coronation is almost upon us, my lady. It is just hours before you will be presented to the court and crowned as his queen in waiting. That is why I wonder, this gown or the other?" "This gown will do," Alma said, gazing at her reflection in the long ovular mirror. The Queen Mother had no people, and Alma had no people just the same. "It is funny you picked this gown," Tilly said, "for it is the very gown the Queen Mother chose 20 years ago when she was presented to court and crowned as the queen in waiting." "Oh," said Alma, "how do you know that? Surely that was well before your time." "My aunt helped me unpack these gowns from storage in anticipation of your arrival," Tilly said. "She served the Queen Mother in her first months here at the castle just as I serve you." Alma regarded the wide velvet swoop of the gown's purple arms. She saw reflected her own hands turned to reverse in the mirror glass. "I would like to meet this aunt of yours," she said to Tilly. "Bring her to me, please." It was, Alma thought, as Tilly bowed her head and left to fetch her aunt, the first order Alma had given. Tilly's aunt came into Alma's room, her face obscured by a veil. "You called for me, lady?" she said, dropping a deep curtsy. Her gown was not the rough-hewn hemp of lesser servants, but a flat black of sturdy material. It was plain by the design, her dress severely plain. "I did," said Alma. "Tilly tells me that you served the Queen Mother when she first came to the castle. I hope you might be able to help me learn my place here, as you have seen a damsel arrive to the castle before." "It is not for me to tell a queen-in-waiting her place," Tilly's aunt said. If anything, it is for her to tell me mine. Your place, said Amma, right now is here at my ear, and I implore you to speak freely and tell me what you can of the Queen Mother and other damsels who have come before me. Tilly's aunt said nothing. Amma felt as though she were being studied very closely through the veil that shrouded the woman's face. For a moment she gave herself over to being examined, but she found she was tired of being the object of others' gazes. What is your name? She asked Tilly's aunt. Alice it is, Tilly's aunt replied. Alice, said Amma. Please remove your veil. If you shall regard me with such a look, then I wish to see your face just as clearly. Alice bowed her head and brought her hands to her veil. She took it up at its hem and folded it back across her head of steel-gray hair. And then she raised her gaze, and Amma looked into her face and into her one green eye. Alice's advice. Where the other eye should have been, there was instead just darkness, a half-closed lid, sunken in and nothing more. Amma felt her mouth fall open and forced herself to close it, to turn her gaze from the missing eye to Alice's remaining eye, green and perceptive, watching now as Amma stared. Does it disgust you, lady? Alice asked. No, Amma said, and her voice was steady. It makes me wonder. Yes, said Alice, that it does. But she did not offer an answer to Amma's unasked question. Instead, she said, What can I tell you, lady? Please, said Amma, tell me about the Queen Mother's early days, when she was a damsel new to this place. She was a beauty, Alice began, as if this was unquestionably the most important piece of information she could offer. Ink-black hair and shiny it was, eyes of amber, a figure worth rescuing, no matter the risk. Bosoms, tremendous bosoms, a waist no bigger around than the king's hands could hold. Small feet, pretty hands. Her eye ran up and down Amma's body as she spoke, and there was a tone to her voice that told a different story than the words she said aloud. Her tone and her roaming gaze clearly said that the Queen Mother had been more beautiful than Amma, shapelier, more feminine, finer. Next to the Queen Mother when she arrived, Amma would have been but a shadow, if that. But Amma did not mind. She found herself not terribly attached to her body or what others might think of it. What of her mind? Amma asked. What did she remember? Remember? Alice asked. Yes, said Amma. Remember. Of the time before her rescue, of her life before. Alice smiled, and her green eye twinkled. Nothing, of course, she said. The damsels have no memory. Never, said Amma. Never, said Alice, as if she dared Amma to tell her she was wrong. But why? I have learned, lady, that why is a dangerous word. Tilly, who had stood quietly by, looking vaguely uncomfortable by the conversation's path, stepped in to say, If that is all, lady, we really must return to our preparations for the coronation. You will be expected to be elegant and well coiffed. This is an important day for you, Alice agreed. The court and the crowds will take the first measure of you, and then mustn't come up short. She bowed and turned to take her leave. But you could have told me nothing, Amma said, and she was angry. Alice turned back around. There is nothing to tell you, Alice answered. The damsels are a legacy of nothing, no memory, no past, no family, except your nothing, and pray it stays that way. Pray it stays that way, you say? Alice's eye darted around the room. So you say there is something for me to remember? Amma pressed. Alice grimaced. She said nothing. Amma waited. At last Alice said, Lady, you are the third damsel I have seen in this castle. I have seen one damsel who moved forward, and one damsel who spun back. I have seen great joy, and I have seen terrible heartbreak. I have seen power, and I have seen weakness. You ask me what I can tell you, and I can tell you this. The castle is your home. King Emery will be your husband. There is only forward. Amma looked into Alice's one eye. She did not know what she searched for there. Please, she said to Alice, tell me something then of the king. Something of the king, Alice repeated. Is Emery a good man? Amma asked. She felt desperate now. Her dress was too tight. Her feet were cold. The place between her legs was tender, and her eyes filled with tears. Alice did not answer straight away. Instead, she looked at Sorrow, who had finished her morning meal and was batting about a length of fabric that Tilly had cut from the hem of one of Amma's gowns. Tell me, she said to Amma, which makes a more pleasing pet, a cat or a rabbit? A cat, said Amma at once. Yes, said Alice, a cat. And do you know why? Amma considered. Because they are more playful? Perhaps, Alice answered, or perhaps because they are more dangerous. Sorrow pounced on the fabric strip, pinned it between her front paws, and tore it in two with her teeth. "Don't be a rabbit, lady," said Alice. "Everyone with a head about them prefers a cat. I should know," she added wryly, "being but a rabbit myself." Alma pressed on. "I have a third question, and the last, I promise. About my eye, is it?" Alma nodded. "Tell me," she said, "what did you wish for when you took an eye from the wall? What need had you so great as to risk an eye?" Alice blinking her one remaining eye. "It is not a nice story, lady," she said. "Yes," said Alma, "that much I guessed," Tilly said, as if she wished to spare her aunt from having to tell the tale. "Years ago, before I was born, when she was in service to the Queen, my aunt drew the attention of a man here at the castle. It was unwanted and often violent." Alma turned to Alice. "Violent? The tastes of men are not all kind," Alice said. "I was the unfortunate recipient of this man's unfortunate predilections." Alma asked, "Who was this man?" "It does not matter," Alice answered, "only to say that I had no power, so I feared my life." "So you went to the wall," Alma said, "and you took an eye, and you wished for this man to die?" Alice sparked a laugh. "That may have been a wiser wish than the one I cast," she said, and then, "But I told you, lady, I am a rabbit, not a cat. I did not wish for his death. I wished only for my safety, to be left alone by him. That is all I asked when I went to the wall and plucked out an eye. It was a green one, I remember, the brightest green." She paused for a moment as if picturing the stolen eye in her hand. Then she turned to Alma and fixed her in a singular gaze. "They caught me with the eye almost as soon as I managed to pry it from the mortar. There was no need for a trial. No one had ever been more plainly guilty than I was, and so they took the wall's eye from my hand and one of mine from my head and sent me on my way." "Oh," said Alma, "but you were only trying to protect yourself." "Law is law," Alice answered. "I swooned from the pain of my sister. This one's mother brought me home. I caught fever from infection and near died, I did. It was weeks before I healed and weeks more before I could work again, but I lived. And when I was in my own head again, I found that the man I so feared wanted no more to do with me, disfigured as I was. So you see, lady, my wish was granted after all." "4. Emery's coronation." Tilly had found a leather collar for Sorrow, and though Alma hated the idea of restraining the lynx, she hated even more the thought of leaving her behind. When she first fastened the collar around Sorrow's neck, the lynx kitten flopped onto her side and clawed at it with her back paws. It was on tightly enough not to come off over her head with such treatment, but not so tightly as to cause discomfort, and when Alma offered her a piece of smoked fish as distraction, Sorrow accepted it and the collar as well. The leash was made of fine gold chain, cool and slippery in Alma's hand. With a leather strap for a handle, Tilly connected the leash to the collar and handed it to Alma, who practiced for some minutes, leading the kit about the room. Sorrow was a smart student, and though it was certain that she would have preferred freedom to being chained, regular rewards of smoked fish and scratches behind her ears seemed to convince her to be complacent enough, and she was still small enough that Alma could carry her if Sorrow grew overwhelmed by crowds, though if she grew as big as her mother had been, this would not always be an option. And Emery said Sorrow must be gone before the wedding night. Alma thought. Sorrow would not be full grown by winter. She would be a gangly youth at best. What would her chances be alone in the forest and in the cold? So Alma had a goal. She must convince Emery to allow her to keep Sorrow past the wedding, at least and perhaps for always. "The coronation will take place out of doors on the high balcony," Tilly said, picking up a fur-trimmed mantle from a chair. "Your lynx will be warm enough, and you should wear this." She swung the mantle across Alma's shoulders and fastened it at her left shoulder with a large brooch. Alma liked the weight of the cloak. She liked the gilded blue stoned clasp. She liked the soft fluff of dark fur against her cheek, with the hood pulled up over her hair. "You cut a fine figure, you do," Tilly said. "The king should be well pleased to have you at his side." Alma took up the leather strap of Sorrow's golden leash. The lynx, smart as she was, followed close as Alma crossed the room to the mirror. There was a lady there, amber eyes shaded by fur-trimmed hood. a lady with a ribbon-laced red braid across her breast, a purple velvet gown, and a lynx sharp of tooth and claw at her heel. The lady in the mirror looked like someone Alma would be pleased to know, and like a complete stranger both at the same time. "You are ready," Tilly sounded certain, and Alma, a stranger to her very own skin, felt it smarter to rely on what Tilly knew than what she herself might feel. Tilly said she was ready, so Alma went. Just inside the high balcony, Alma found Emery waiting for her. "And when I thought you couldn't be lovelier," he said, with a sweeping bow. "Thou, here you come, a delight, a velvet and fur, to prove me wrong. Your lynx companion makes for a lovely accessory, I shall grant you that." Emery reached out for Alma's hand, and she hesitated only a second before extending it. He flipped a hand over and kissed her there, in the soft white center of her palm. Then he pulled her close and whispered into her ear, "Dearest, please accept my apology for my appearance last night in your quarters. It is certainly not my character to act in such a passion-fueled manner. But who could blame me when a beauty such as yourself is under my roof and so close to being my wife? Certainly many men would not have been able to restrain themselves at all, confronted with the same situation." He withdrew slightly so that Alma could see into his deep blue eyes, so that Alma could see his softly tilting smile. She felt her own mouth pull into a returning smile and cast her gaze down. "I thank you for your uncommon restraint, my lord," she answered. "The time will come soon enough that such restraint shall not be required of me," Emery said, "and that is a day I truly look forward. Until then, I shall try not to allow your feminine powers to induce me to another such visit." Alma dropped a curtsy as best she could with her one hand still taken up by Emery's, and her other hand clutching Sorrow's leash. She was relieved when she heard the rustling of the Queen Mother's skirts behind her, and Emery released her hand to greet her. "Mother," he said, voice full and loud now, "you look positively charming." Alma turned and curtsied. The Queen Mother's gown, built of sharp black taffeta, was covered all over by a flowering bloom of gems, on her chest a bouquet designed of rubies, citrons, sapphires, and diamonds, and down her waist and across the vast expanse of her skirt wound curlicues of thorn-laced stems rendered in ropes of emeralds. She did not wear a cape, most probably because she did not want to obscure the fine jewelled work of her gown, but her hair was in a vine-like network of braids which roses and pink gems tucked into the filigree of the rose-gold crown that circled her head. "Alma," she said when Alma rose from her curtsy, "you must introduce me to this glorious pet of yours." "Certainly, Queen Mother," Alma said, hoping desperately that the lynx should receive her silent pleas to behave herself. "This is the kit I call Sorrow." The Queen Mother offered her hand, and Sorrow sniffed it, and then extended her pretty pink tongue at a kiss. "A darling," the Queen Mother said admiringly, and scratched the cat between the ears. Sorrow stepped forward and rubbed her head against the Queen Mother's skirt and purred, a deep rumble of a sound. The Queen Mother laughed, delighted. "I believe your Sorrow finds in me a sympathetic friend," she said, and then looked up at Alma with an expression so searing that Alma laid bare with it, as if the force of the gaze had burned her clothes and her limbs and her skin as well. "I hope Sorrow's mistress finds me equally sympathetic," she said. "Indeed," Alma answered at once, for she knew it was the correct answer, whether it was the truth or not. "You must visit me in my chambers and meet my pets," the Queen Mother continued. Alma bowed her head in thanks for the invitation. "Shall we?" Emery said, and then they turned, Emery at the center, flanked by the Queen Mother at his right, and Alma herself accompanied by Sorrow on his left. Guards opened the doors to the high balcony, and Alma was assaulted by a rush of sound and cold. They stepped into the stone and to an icy wetness, not quite rain, not quite sleet, in the rumble of a crowded mountain, into a deafening roar. Emery and the Queen Mother raised their hands in greeting, and Alma did as well. At her side, Sorrow mewed and pressed against her, overwhelmed by the crowd. Alma felt overwhelmed too, looking down upon the throng of people below. How long had they stood in this weather, waiting for a glimpse of their king? And bent to scoop the lynx into her arms, she tucked her beneath the cloak and pulled it closed, protecting her from the roar of the crowd. There were red-faced children down there, snot streaming from their noses, some with no shoes. There were women suckling babes, and men waving small banners and harding insignia, Alma guessed, painted onto them, a green dragon, and behind it the shadow figure of a king. The banners were everywhere on hand-held flags, on waving banners, on tapestry that hung on either side of the high balcony. Alma had the prickly sensation of having walked into someone else's story, a story which everyone but she knew her role in their lines. The king's job was to conquer. Emery had proved admirable to that. No one could say otherwise. The dragon's job was to be vanquished, and as there was currently no dragon to be seen other than the rough illustrations all around, it seemed that dragon had done its job as well. But between the dragon and the king there should have been a third figure, Alma thought. There should have been a damsel. "Smile," Emery hissed into her ear. His own face curled into a grin. "And wave. The people are waiting for you." Alma arranged her face as she was told. She grasped the lynx close and raised her hand for the people below. They exploded into cheers, and beneath her cloak, hidden from everyone, Sorrow dug her claws into Alma's chest, dampening the fine velvet gown with blood. musician's song. The great hall had undergone a near magical transformation from when Alma had seen it late the night before. Then it had been almost empty and shadowy and solemn as well. Now, when Amma entered it at the coronation's finish on the arm of her king, it was the sight of a raucous, jubilant celebration, elegantly dressed bodies crammed shoulder against shoulder, waiting to congratulate King Emery and meet his damsel prize. Some of the people wore tall, elaborate wigs, some were wrought with jewels, some looked squeezed into their coats and dresses, as if the meal they were about to eat would burst the already stained steams. Others looked as though their natural state was in this elegant dress, carrying themselves almost as if they floated. A trio of musicians plucked at their stringed instruments, but the sound they produced was barely audible, overlaid by the voices of the crowd, loud chatter, piercing laughter, here and there an argument, heated tones of conflict waxing and then waning like a moon. Alma was glad she had sent Sorrow back to her room with Tilly. This was no place for a nervous animal. She wished she could have excused herself from the feast as well, but Emery had a firm grip on her hand, raised high, and he seemed as intent to show her off as he was the new crown he wore on his head. A heavy ring of 3 interwoven metals, platinum, bronze, rose gold, which crested a series of dangerous-looking spikes all around. Unlike the Queen Mother's crown, which had been soft in its lines, though clearly great worth, Emery's new headpiece looked as deadly as a weapon, each spike a sharp-tipped point, and 3 metals of which it was built locked into a battle for dominance. All of the people who wanted to touch Amma and Emery, hand after hand extended to her as Emery introduced her to an endless stream of his closest friends and advisers. "This is Duke and Duchess of Croming," Emery told Amma, and the Duke kissed her hand and the Duchess held it by the fingers as she curtsied. "This is Father Jacob," Emery said next to the round-faced priest, bobbed his head at Amma's head, clutched in his sweaty grasp. And on it went, the introductions, and each with a curtsy, each kiss, its grasp of her hand. Amma felt as if she were the mutton at the table, being consumed bite after bite. They were seated at last, and only when everyone was at the tables did the Queen Mother enter, avoiding the crush of the greeters and slipping smoothly into her seat beside the king. She saw Amma's envious expression and laughed. "I had my years of receiving," she said. "It is your turn now to bear that burden." And then the meal began, and the crowd hushed over their meat and med, so Amma could hear the musician's song clearly at last. She realized at once that never before had she heard anything like this, like music, not in the time since Emery rescued her from the dragon, and she knew with absolute clarity of mind, not before that either. It was the closest she had to a memory, the surety of absence, this knowledge that never before had her ears heard a song. It was a truth that belonged only to her, a secret that she tucked away like a hidden jewel. There was a meat on her plate and med in her cup, and Alma wanted neither. She tilted her head toward the musicians, closed her eyes to better concentrate on the tune, and breathed as quietly as she could. It was a song of joy and celebration, that was clear. Quick, loud, upbeat. 2 of the musicians plucked the notes from the strings, but the third drew a bow across his instrument to release his song. Together the 3 instruments braided separate notes into something greater than any of them could produce alone. Alma's heart felt both full and light in the same moment. "Are you all right?" Emery asked, breaking her focus. Alma's eyes snapped open. She was back in the opulent, overcrowded hall, stuffed with bodies and smells, so many smells, the meat and the vegetables, oily in butter and juices, the med, sour and heavy, the bodies around her and her own flesh as well, constricted in the 2 tight velvets, stewing as if she were in another dish. "I am fine," she answered. "I was just listening to the music." "Well, eat your meat," Emery demanded, pointing with his knife down the long table. "Everyone else has stopped feasting in deference to you." It was true, Alma saw. All up and down the table, forks and knives were suspended mid-air, or laid aside, as the court watched her face and waited for her to enjoy her meal. The terrible burden of everyone's eyes upon her made any hunger Alma may have felt disappear completely. Still, this was her duty, one of many, Alma was learning, and so she smiled and took up a fork full of potato, brought it to her mouth, chewed, swallowed. The table guests, satisfied, returned to their own plates, and after a moment of eating slowly, Alma saw that there was some shelter in doing as she was expected to do. It was when she broke from her roll that attention felt especially heavy. When she busied herself with raising and lowering her fork, and then her cup, and then her napkin, she seemed to fade into the texture of the room. At her side, leaning back in his chair to survey the hall, Emery emitted a palpable air of satisfaction. "It's lovely, isn't it, Alma?" he asked, gesturing expansively at the golden platters overflowing with food, the pitchers full of drink, the musicians in their corner, the rainbow of satins and silks all down the long table. "It's one of the sadness that Paulin has not come from home at this hunt in time for the coronation. He does love a good feast. I'm sure he will be glad to hear the news when he returns, my king." "Undoubtedly," Emery said, and his gaze landed softly on Alma. "And better still would be to share with him that I have found my damsel." Emery's hand, a warm weight settled on Alma's. All of this is sweeter, my love, with you at my side. Alma's fingers spread to allow Emery's to interlace. It was a comfort, in a way, the weight and presence of his hand. Such a lovely couple. It was the prior who had spoken the ceremonial words at Emery's coronation, a man spider-like in the length of his limbs, his white hair a web atop his head. He had shed his formal crimson robes for the rite and was dressed now in a rich black cassock that fell in a straight line from chin to toes. He had not, Alma noticed, set aside his jewelry. The sharp-tipped, triangular pendant still hung on its polished silver chain around his neck, and an assortment of 7 rings still bejeweled from 4 fingers on his right hand, and all but the pointer finger on his left. And he spoke with Emery about the coronation, the size of the crowd, the good fortune of heavy rain swaying away from the day. Alma found that she could not look away from the rings. On the prior's left hand were a yellow stone, a green stone, and a purple stone. On the right were a blue stone, a red stone, an indigo stone, and an orange stone. Have you considered wearing the purple stone on the right hand and the blue stone on the left? Alma blurted at last, when she could stand it no longer. Emery's lip curled slightly as if he had smelled something unfortunate. "What is that, girl?" asked the prior, leaning in to hear. She had interrupted in mid-sentence, Alma realized now, and her face flushed with shame. "Forgive me," she said, and cast down her eyes. The men turned back toward each other to continue their conversation. "It's only," Alma said, her voice louder than she intended. "You see, if you were to trade the blue stone ring for the purple, you could, couldn't you? Each one is on a middle finger. If you were to switch them, prior, that the colors of the stones on your right hand could all be made by combining the colors from the stones on your left hand." "She is new to our ways, prior," said the king, smoothly interjecting. "You must forgive her impertinence." "I shall do better than that," said the prior with a quick smile. "I shall humor it," and he slipped off the blue ring of the purple, rearranging them in a way that Alma had suggested. "Better?" he asked. "Much," Alma answered, and she bobbed her head in thanks. "Don't they please the eye this way?" Now, Alma noticed, quite a crowd of people was listening to their conversation, watching as the prior regarded his hands. "'Tis not for my station to pay heed to such things," said the prior at last, "but yes, your highness, I suppose they do please the eye this way as well as the other." Emery cleared his throat. "I must thank you, prior, for your fine speech at the coronation." "Oh, my king," the prior said, swishing his skirt as he bowed. "What a pleasure it was to officiate. It is not every prior who has the great honor of coronating 2 kings. You cut a figure in that crown that nearly twinned that of your father, only taller. You know," he said, turning to Alma, "I will also have the pleasure of wedding 2 queens to their kings." "Is that so?" Alma said. "Indeed it is," the prior said. He turned to Emery with a wink. "But the betting, my king, is entirely your duty." The 2 men laughed, and Alma felt herself blush, wishing she could turn herself inside out or disappear. She felt a jolt of shame for what she did not know. She longed to be anywhere but here, and her eyes cast about the table as if for escape. There at the table's center was a fat-bottomed violet glass bowl, half full of water, in which several candles floated, their tiny flames steady and bright, reflecting up from the water off the sides of the bowl. It was lovely to Alma. This must be one of the glass-blower's creations, she thought, and thinking of the glass-blower turned her mind to the eyes in the wall. Eyes that watched and eyes that judged, eyes that perhaps granted wishes, if one dared to ask. It was loud and crowded in the great hall, too loud and too crowded by far, and Alma sat very still and let her own eyes blur as she watched the flicker of light on water and glass. Isolde's dresses. The next morning was still cold, colder perhaps than the day before, but the sky outside of Alma's window was clear, bright blue. In the sky hung a cold, distant sun, flat and painful to look at, though Alma's eyes returned to it again and again as if drawn there by some magnetism. Her head hurt, a dull ache, and she gazed at the sun, and there was a sharp pain behind her eyes as well. But she found it difficult to look away. A word came to her, homesick, and Alma blinked, rubbed her eyes, turned back to her room and her fire. Now, as if the sun had been printed on her eyes everywhere she looked, Alma saw its shadow, small black circles floating in her field of vision. She played with this effect, closing one eye and then the other, regarding her room, her fire, the links through the spectre of ghost suns that she alone could see, until they faded, and disappeared, and her room was ordinary once more. Nothing, though, was ordinary about her links. Alma regarded her with a mother's pride, the way she stretched long in front of the fire, her tawny coat, her black-tipped ears, her oversized paws front and back, her funny bobbed tail. You could have been indoors too long, I think, Alma told the kid. We both have. So when Tilly returned to the room for another session of gown fitting, this time for the wedding dress it would take weeks to create, Alma said to her, We shall do that another time. Now I require my cloak and Sorrow's leash. She and I are going out of doors. Tilly bowed her head and did as she was asked, helping Alma to step into leather overshoes and covering Alma's shoulders with fur-trimmed cloak. Alma fastened its brooch, pulled on the gloves Tilly gave to her, and took up Sorrow's leash. Would you like company, lady? Tilly asked. I am never alone when I have my sorrow, Alma answered. Perhaps you could take some time for yourself while I am out of doors. Tilly regarded her blankly, unblinking in a way that made Alma blush. It was untoward of her to suggest such a thing, she saw at once, but nevertheless she forged ahead. You are welcome to stay here if you would like and enjoy the fire and breakfast tray. Then before Tilly could answer, Alma turned for the door, Sorrow's claws clicking to the hard floor beside her. But once on the staircase, Alma allowed fear to seep in. She had no idea where she was going or how she could find her way back to her own room. Never mind all that, she told Sorrow, though Sorrow did not look as if she had been fretting. We shall figure that out later. For now, let us find the gardens. It was several staircases, and many missed turns later that Alma found a door that led her outside. She had ignored the curious looks from the servants she encountered and found herself hoping that she would not run into Emery on her way out of the castle. Perhaps he would not let her go outside, Alma thought, which made her feel queasy. But stepping across the threshold into the outside world blew all such thoughts straight from her mind. Alma felt herself smiling as she stretched her arms wide, standing on an expansive black stone porch, wrapped around with pillars of the same ebony stone, and filled her chest with cold, clean air. Sorrow nipped at her skirt hem, urging her back into motion, and Alma started off again briskly, hopping down the stairs to the hard, flat ground. Let's see where this path takes us, shall we? She said to her lynx companion, and it was clear by the trot that Sorrow took up that she was well pleased with his adventure. Alma's attention was divided by the blue of the sky, the white of the sun disk in it, the satisfying crunch of the dirt and the pebbles beneath her leather shoes, the frigid breath of the cold fall air on her face, the exquisitely soft brush of her hood's fur against her cheek, the joyful gait of the lynx at her side. All is well, she thought suddenly, and she felt happy. She wandered the black castle at her back, the weight of it feeling lighter and lighter the farther from it she stepped. And then she rounded a tall bend of the hedges and found herself in an enclosed space, 10-foot hedges all around, bigger than her personal chamber, but smaller than the great hall, open for a smaller round planter of hedges at its center, those trimmed to waist height. All of the hedges here, like elsewhere on the castle grounds, were dormant for the winter months. Leaves got a network of branches that would grow anew with the spring's arrival. By the time the leaves had sprouted and the flowers had bloomed, Alma would be a wife and a queen. She dismissed this thought and knelt down at Sorrow's side. The kitten was sniffing around in the dirt and paused to look at Alma's eyes. Alma felt her own eyes burn with tears as if she had been struck, as if to be looked at by the kit with such clarity was painful. This was surely a safe place to let you romp, Alma said, and she loosened her collar from Sorrow's neck and dropped it to the leash to the ground. Pleased Sorrow trotted around the space and Alma followed her. The kitten squatted to relieve herself, her puddle of urine spreading across the dry dirt. Ho, what's this? It was a man's voice suddenly from the split of the hedge through which Alma had entered. She turned around, instinctively grabbing close to the neck of her mantle. I've surprised you, said the man with a grin. It was nice enough grin on a handsome enough man, but neither the grin nor the man caught Alma's attention nearly as much as the bird he carried. It was a great black hawk with rust-colored feathers on her wings and legs, and scaly yellow claws that ended in vicious talons. She stared at Alma with unblinking brown eyes, from her eyes to her black beak. Her face was the same yellow as her feet. Her hooked beak ended in a dangerous spike. Her expression was either haughty or desperately sad. Alma could not tell which. You are Paulin, Alma said, and this is Isolde, I presume. Correct on both accounts, Paulin said with a bow, a mocking sweep of his short cloak. He kept his hawk arm parallel with the ground as he bowed, clearly well practiced. And you are the Lady Alma, Paulin said, his grin widening. That is what I have been told, Alma answered. Clever as well as lovely, Paulin said, and whether it was a compliment or an assessment made no difference. Sorrow, who had finished relieving her bladder, returned to Alma's side on careful paws, her eyes trained on the hawk. Your beast is a beauty, Paulin remarked, and his appreciation was clear now. Tell me about her. Alma knelt and scooped up the kid, who was already heavier since their arrival to the castle. This is my Sorrow, she said. An unfortunate name for a pet, Paulin said. Perhaps you should consider something more sporting. Bounder, for instance, or Fleetfoot. Those were, Alma felt, perfectly terrible names. Thank you for your idea, she demurred. But Sorrow is her name, and so it shall remain. Paulin narrowed his eyes, and Alma had the impression that he, like Emery, was not a man who often heard his ideas rebuffed, but he was not Emery, and she had no leech with him. So she lifted her chin and dared him to say another thing about it. I do wonder, Paulin said, who would take the prize in a contest between your beast and mine? He stroked the sleek feathers on Isolde's back, and Alma would swear Isolde smiled, though a beak cannot smile. My sorrow is not yet grown, Amma said. When she is, I am certain she would be the victor. But today, Pollen said, and his free hand went to the justice on his gauntlet. I wonder about today. Amma watched with growing horror as Pollen's fingers took up the thin, knotted leather strips and began to pull. Sorrow's leash. Amma clutched the lynx kitten closer to her chest as Pollen's fingers freed the first set of leather straps. Now the hawk's left foot was unfettered. She watched as he slowly moved toward the second set of justice as he prepared to pull them apart, his eyes locked on her face, his mouth grating terribly. Please, gasped Amma, uttering the words so that she had worked such power with Emery. I beg you, please, my sorrow is all I have, all that is mine. All that you have? Pollen said, his fingers pausing midair. What of your king? Of course, Amma said in a rush. I have him as well. I have Emery. I wonder if you do, Pollen said, and he was not smiling down. Indeed, I wonder if he truly has you. Amma had no idea what he could mean by this. Of course Emery had her. He had freed her from the dragon. He had brought her here to the castle. He had trapped her in his walls in his velvet gown and these leather shoes. She was his, sure as the sun. Indeed he has, Amma breathed, and she hated how weak her voice sounded, how much power Pollen had right now, in the very tips of his fingers. If he were to pull free that last knot, then Isolde would attack, and there was no doubt of that. She was a hunter with claws and beak to catch and tear. Would he have loosed the knot? Would she have held her own sorrow in her arms as the great hawk tore open her throat, as Emery's weapon had torn open her mother's? She was not to know, not today, not for that moment. There was a rustle once more from the divide in the hedges, and Emery appeared. Never had Amma been so grateful to see him. A sound like a cry slipped from her lips, and though the kitten still clutched at her arms, she ran to him. My king, she said, and his arms wound around her waist, her head tucked under his chin, between the bodies safe now, protected with sorrow. What's this? Boomed Emery. My friend and my lady in a secret meeting in this winter garden. Perhaps he was jesting. Perhaps he was not. It was not possible to tell. I wanted to get out of doors, Amma said, hating the sound of her own voice. And the air was so fresh and the day so fine, and I walked for a long time and found myself here. I wonder that you did not send word for my company, or at least my consent, Emery said. What a disappointment. Amma pulled away from the crook of Emery's neck, into which she had buried her face, and tilted her eyes to Emery's. But he was not looking at her. He was looking at Pollen. Amma did the same, turning to regard Pollen, who had refastened Isolde's justice. His face and the bird's were twin masks of haughty unknowableness. Pollen, Emery said, his voice friendly now, I did not know you had returned from the hunt. I arrived with the sun this morning, Pollen said, smiling. I would have hurried on home, had I known that you would be so quick with your expedition, my lord. 'Tis my king now, isn't it? Said Emery, gesturing to his crown. As I heard my king, Pollen answered, and though he said the right words and made the right bows, his tone and carriage did not denote the difference in their ranks. This did not seem to bother Emery, who laughed loud, and walked away from Amma to clasp with Pollen by the shoulders and a rough embrace. So it has come to pass, Pollen said when they split apart, and your damsel prize is every bit as lovely as the legends told she would be. Lovelier, Emery said, and an edge to his voice. Lovelier, Pollen corrected, indeed lovelier. Now they were both appraising her, and Isolde too. And had she not held sorrow in her arms, she would have felt naked under the scrutiny of their shared gaze. Lovely, Emery said, yes, but obedient, perhaps no, not yet. Please, my king, Amma begged, for what she knew not. Emery bent and retrieved Sorrow's leash from where Amma had laid it aside. He wrapped the golden chain around his fist once, twice, 3 times, and walked slowly to Amma's side. Dearest Amma, he said, and his voice was gentle. It was playful, was it not? Sorrow growled low but fierce, and Amma dug her fingers into the kitten's scruff, her manner of telling the animal to silence. Emery's gaze went to Sorrow, went to Amma's white knuckles clutching the animal's fur. His eyes narrowed, and for a flash Amma saw how much Emery would like to kill her Sorrow. Emery reached out with his chain-wrapped fist, and gently, so gently, he pushed back Amma's hood. Cold rushed over Amma's head into her ears. She heard a ringing sound high and sharp from the inside of her own head. The cold golden chain brushed Amma's cheek, along the length of her jaw, down the line of her throat. Please, she said again. Emery's free hand took the leather collar attached to the end of the chain and drew it around Amma's neck. It fit her tight, but fit it did, and he fastened the clasp so that it lay like a jewel in the soft depression where her pulse fluttered fast. Enough with please, Emery said, his voice still light. Now say thank you. Fabiana's king. By the time they neared the castle's entrance, Amma had stopped pleading for Emery to take off the leash. Her own hands could undo the buckle, that was true, But though the thought passed fleetingly through Alma's mind, she dismissed it immediately, though she could not say why. The first person to see her in the state of humiliation, other than Paulin, who had chortled like it was the funniest thing, was an old man sweeping the stone path outside the castle side entrance. He looked up when he heard them coming, and his eyes went wide at the sight of them. Emery in the lead, the leash in his hand, Alma 2 steps behind, hurrying to keep up with the quick pace he set, the squirming lynx in her arms. Then he cast his eyes down quickly, as if he had seen something shameful or private, and dropped to a deep bow as they passed. The kitchen bustled, full of preparations for dinner, and Alma felt in her arms sorrow straining toward all the savory smells. She tried to keep her eyes on the floor as Emery wove a path through the cooks and kitchen girls, all of whom stopped what they were doing, stirring pots, stroking fires, chopping vegetables, to drop into curtsies and say reverently, "My king." No one mentioned Alma's current situation, of course, and more than that, no one even acknowledged her presence. It was so much as though she was invisible that Alma began to question her very existence. Was she there truly on a leash, following King Emery through the castle kitchen? Or was she still abed, dreaming? Or perhaps she was somewhere else, somewhere farther away and higher, much higher, somewhere thick with warmth and shine? She was here in this kitchen on this chain. Her eyes glanced up and tingled with the gaze of a girl who brought her morning tray. The one Tilly had called Fabiana. Like the men outside, Fabiana's first expression was wide-eyed, and then her expression shifted, and as she was curtsied deeply, Alma sensed something akin to triumph in her voice as she said, "My king." All through the castle, Alma followed Emery, through the great hall and up 2 steps of stairs, down the long stone hallway to the door to her very own chamber. Emery turned the door's knob and pushed it open without a moment's hesitation, as he owned this room as surely as he owned the rest of the castle. There was Tilly on her knees before the fire, a bucket of ashes at her side. She was filling the fireplace with fresh wood and kindling, and at this sight the tears that had stung Alma's eyes began to spill. "I return to you, your lady," Emery said jovially, thrusting the leash's handle in Tilly's direction. Tilly stood wiping her hands on her apron and dropped a curtsy. "King Emery," she said. He thrust the handle again toward Tilly, who after a moment's hesitation stepped forward to accept it. Then Emery turned to Alma, his beautiful wide teeth exposed in a beautiful smile. "No tears, Alma," he said, wiping them gently from her cheeks. "That was just fun and games after all." And then he took her chin in his hand and drew her close and kissed her forehead as if she were a child, and then he went away at last. When the door closed behind him, Alma released the choked sobs she'd held in her throat all that time. She sank to her knees on the floor, set sorrow down, and cried as if she were indeed a child. Swiftly, Tilly sank down beside her and unfastened the collar from Alma's throat. "Lady," she said, her tone almost reverent. "Oh, lady." It was the gentleness of her voice that undid Alma completely. She slumped into Tilly's arms, allowed the girl to guide her head against her chest, and lost herself in Tilly's embrace. Alma cried, and Tilly rocked her, and sorrow came to comfort Alma as well, patting the crown of her head again and against Alma's hands. But one cannot cry forever. After a time, Alma sucked in air and straightened herself up and wiped her eyes with her hands. Tilly got up and went to fetch her a handkerchief, and with that Alma dried her dripping nose. "Oh, Tilly," she said, when she was able to speak again, "it was awful." "I can imagine it was, lady," Tilly said. Alma shook her head, remembering everything. "Perhaps it was just for fun," Tilly suggested. "It was not fun for me," Alma answered. "No," said Tilly, "clearly not." She stood, rather awkwardly, waiting for Alma to stand, so Alma stood. This seemed to relieve Tilly, the return to normalcy. She unfastened the cloak's brooch and laid the cloak aside. "Would you like something to drink, lady?" she offered. "No, Tilly, thank you." Alma found her way to the chair by the unlit fire. "Could you perhaps get this going?" "It was meant for this evening," Tilly answered, "when it is cooler." But when Alma didn't respond, Tilly said quickly, "Of course, lady, at once." She lit the fire. She fixed a pot of barley tea and poured Alma a cup of it, and Alma held it with both hands. When Tilly bustled around the room, shaking out the cloak and hanging it back in its place, kneeling at Alma's feet to unbuckle her leather overshoes, then taking a brush to them to clean away dirt, "Tilly," said Alma, "sit and have a cup of tea with me." Tilly stopped mid-stroke, brushing the air. "Oh, lady," she said, "I couldn't." "I insist," Alma said, and after a moment more, Tilly set aside the shoes and the brush and poured herself a cup of barley tea, and pulled a footstool up close to Alma and the fire. They drank their tea. When Alma's cup was empty, Tilly refilled it, and when Tilly's was nearly dry, Alma reached for the pot to serve her. "Oh, lady, no," Tilly said, covering her cup with her hand. "Thanks to you, but you should not be serving me." Alma could have pressed, but she could see how uncomfortable Tilly was, the way she sat on the very edge of the footstool like an anxious little bird who was apt to fly away at any moment. She withdrew her hand from the teapot, but after a moment she said, "Please, Tilly, help yourself to more." Tilly looked unsure about what she was supposed to do next, but at last she grinned a real smile and said, "Well, lady, if you insist." She still would not let Alma pour for her, though. Alma did not want Tilly to move from her seat beside the fire. She did not want to be alone. Alma gasped. "Lady," said Tilly, "are you all right?" Alma stared into the fire and did not answer. She did not want Tilly to leave. She did not want to be alone. This was something like her knowledge that she had never heard before. Music, that was fresh, new thing. Something she had no memory of from before. Before Emery had saved her from the dragon, Amma had never been lonely. Amma's question. Sleep came for Amma in two parts. The first after retiring from an uncomfortable meal in the great hall where revelers and musicians were not enough to distract Amma from what occurred in the morning in the garden. Everyone all up and down the table, even the servants, looked at her with knowing eyes and whispered to one another behind their hands. Her shame darkened her cheeks and caused her to cast down her eyes, but the Queen Mother said to her, "They will talk, they will always talk. It is your duty to hold your head up and not give them more to discuss than they may already have." Amma listened and lifted her chin. "And you," the Queen Mother said in a low hiss, wagging her fork at Emery, as if he were a boy who had been caught stealing cream for the pitcher, "you should know better than to treat Amma in such a fashion. As if she were a scullery maid and not your future queen." He was pretending to look contrite, Amma saw. He was not sorry, not really. "Amma knows it was but a game," he said. "She is not angry." The Queen Mother raised one eyebrow. "She does not look happy," she said. And so Amma arranged her face into a pleasant mask. Whether to please the court or the Queen Mother or King Emery, she didn't know. Certainly it was not to please herself. "You will have to show her you are sorry with the gift," the Queen Mother said, "and you, Amma, must visit me in my chambers on the morrow. We have much to discuss, you and I." It was this that troubled Amma late in the night, after the first sleep, after the warming stones in her bed had lost all their heat. But before Tilly had come to replace them, the Queen Mother wished Amma to visit. And so Amma would. Would this be her life, a long, uncertain chain of answering when called upon? Certainly not, thought Amma, rolling onto her side and taking care not to disturb Sorrow, who liked to sleep as if she were a person. Head on the bolster beside Amma's, the rest of her tucked warmly beneath the cover. When she was a queen, Amma thought, then her life would be sure. Certainly no one, not even the king, would dare to hurt the queen. She told herself this, but she did not believe it, and now she was wide awake, despite the desperate darkness of the room. So Tilly would come, she would take the cold stones away and replace them with hot ones, and she would rebuild the fire as well, if Amma asked her to. And soon, though not soon enough for Amma, Tilly did come. Through the thick bed curtains that surrounded her, Amma could not make out even a hint of Tilly's shape, but she knew it was Tilly in her chamber, and the sound of her steps, light, even quick. Tilly pulled back the curtain at the foot of the bed, preparing to take the cold stones away, and her eyes widened when she saw by the light of the candle that she held Amma sitting up in her bed. "You are awake, lady." Her candle sent wavering shadows to dance on the walls all around. "I am," said Amma. Tilly came to the head of the bed, pulled back the curtain there, and placed the candle on the table near the headboard. "Do you thirst?" she asked, after she had taken away the cold stones and replaced them with hot stones for the fire. "No," said Amma. "Do you need to use the pot?" "No," said Amma again. Tilly made to draw the curtains closed again. "Well," she said, "peaceful dreams to you." "Wait," said Amma, "don't go." There was a look on Tilly's face, just a flash of an expression, irritation perhaps, but she smoothed it as surely as she had smoothed the wrinkles from the blanket. "Of course, lady," she answered, and stood near the head of Amma's bed, awaiting further instructions, but Amma did not wish to instruct her. What she wished was that Tilly wanted to stay. What she wished was that Tilly was her friend. "Would you care to sit on the bed with me?" Amma asked, but for this Tilly seemed to have no answer. Her mouth opened and then closed again, soundlessly. "Sit on the bed with me," Amma said, rephrasing her question into a command. Tilly obeyed, perching on the edge of Amma's bed, much as she had earlier perched on the edge of the footstool, prepared to rise in an instant if called upon to do so. "Not like that," Amma said, seating herself even higher on her bolsters and crossing her legs beneath the covers. "Like this." With an air of reluctant acceptance, Tilly scooted farther on the mattress, kicked her shoes away, and folded her legs beneath her. Sorrow slept through the whole procedure. A question occurred to Amma. "Tilly," she said, "where do you sleep?" "In the servants' quarters, on a pallet," Tilly answered promptly. "Is it comfortable?" Amma asked. "It serves," Tilly said. "You sleep with others, then?" Amma said. "I do." Amma considered this. Her feeling of loneliness, in the way it contrasted with her memory of the absence of that emotion, ballooned in her chest, creating a great inward pressure. "It is nice to be so much with others." "It can be," Tilly answered. She leaned back onto her hands, relaxing. "There is always some girl or other with a story or a joke to tell, and when I wake between sleeps, there is almost always someone else awake too. On a cold night there are bodies with whom to share heat." Amma nodded, imagining a room full of pallets, each with a girl upon it. "Of course it has its drawbacks," Tilly said, growing more conversational with the passing minutes, "like when one of the girls gets a midnight guest and the rest of us have to lie still pretending to be asleep. Why, not long ago, Fabiana—" but then she cut off suddenly, as if she had remembered to whom she was speaking. Amma pressed gently. "Fabiana? She is one of the kitchen maids, yes?" Tilly nodded. "Yes, lady." Amma remembered the glares she had gotten from Fabiana, the particular weight Fabiana had given to her words that morning. "Fabiana, I think, does not like me much," Amma said. "Pay her no mind, that one," Tilly said. "She is just jealous and fancies herself more important than she is." "Her midnight guest," Amma began. "That wouldn't be King Emery, could it?" Tilly coughed, and suddenly, in the candle's dim light, Alma could see from her wide eyes casting about how uncomfortable the question had made her. "It's perfectly fine with me," Alma said quickly, in an attempt to lessen Tilly's discomfort. "I don't mean at all that Emery has visited Fabiana. It's only that I wonder, well, that is to say, if she is jealous of me, as you say. Does that mean she enjoys it? His visiting?" Tilly barked a sudden laugh. "From the sounds she makes, I'd say she does." As soon as the words came out, Tilly gasped and slapped her hands across her mouth. "Oh, lady," she said, jumping from the bed, "please, I beg your pardon. I forgot my place is all." "Not at all," said Alma, reaching for Tilly's hand and squeezing it. "You answered a question, that is all. I am not angry." Tilly searched Alma's face, and she must have seen the proof there that she had upset Alma, for her own face relaxed and her shoulders dropped a little, and she said, "Well, that is a relief, lady." She turned as if to go. "If that it will be all, I shall leave you to your second sleep. The Queen Mother expects you in the morning. She does, and you won't want to look worn out for that meeting." Alma wanted to compel Tilly to stay longer, but clearly the girl wanted to leave. Anna bit back her sigh and said, "Yes, Tilly, thank you." Tilly gone, her candle with her. Alma stared blindly into the dark. She imagined Emery and Fabiana. She pictured his mouth on her face, on her breast, as they had been on Alma. She imagined his fingers parting Fabiana between her legs, as they had parted her. She wondered what Fabiana felt inside her flesh, as if she truly did feel pleasure beneath Emery's hands and body. Was it like the pleasure she felt with the warm press of sorrow's sleeping form up against her side? Was it equal to the pleasure of a good meal eaten, or the relief of moving one's bowels? Or could it possibly be the way Alma felt when she sat, as near as she could, to the warmth and radiance of a well-built fire? Settling back against her bolster, Alma closed her eyes and resolved that come the morning she would find out. The King's Yard. The kitchen was crowded. Alma had risen early before Tilly had come to her, and left Sorrow tucked in bed. She had thrown her cloak across her shoulders and drew on a pair of silk slippers, before leaving her room and clicking closed the door behind her. "I am not leaving the castle," Alma told herself to quiet her pounding heart. "The king could not be angry about me just wandering inside the castle walls." Feeling rather like a thief, Alma stole down the stairs and found her way to the steamy heart of the castle. There in the kitchen fires were alight in several places. Under a great oven cooking bread, beneath a vast pot in its mouth as wide as a doorway, in the expansive hearth, where several blackened pots hung, stewing various delights. 2 women and a boy no older than 10 worked at rolling out great slabs of dough, puffs of flour rising from their labors. A young girl stood in front of a large bowl, cracking egg after egg into it, ruby strands of membrane hanging from the broken edges of each shell. By the hearth, Alma saw Tilly's Aunt Alice, bidding to add some spice or salt into one of the 3 hanging pots. Alice looked up at Alma, her one green eye seeing her straight through. Alma looked away. Tilly's aunt scared her, though she couldn't quite say why. Instead, she approached the girl with the eggs. "Excuse me," she said, and the girl drew in a quick breath, startled. The egg in her hand slipped from her fingers, cracked against the table's egg, and fell to the floor, a mess of yolk and slippery membrane. "Watch yourself, girl," barked one of the 2 women who worked at the dough, troubling herself to come over just long enough to slap the girl's head hard across her ears. The girl's head snapped to the side, and she grimaced, but she did not cry out, maintaining her air of practiced acceptance of someone well used to such treatment. "Forgive her, lady." The baker had stuck. The girl bowed. "Can I serve for you?" Alma glared at the woman. "You could serve me well by going back to your work and leaving this child alone." The baker's eyes widened, and she made a short curtsy before backing away. "Forgive me, lady," she said, as if it had been Alma's ear she boxed, and not the child's. When the baker was gone, Alma said to the girl who had knelt and was mopping up the neck, I'm sorry I got you into trouble." "'Tis nothing," the girl answered, rising, and remembered her manners. with a curtsy, the egg-soaked rag still in her hand. "I am looking for Fabiana," Amma said. "Have you seen her?" The girl nodded. "She is in the larder, counting stock." "I see," said Amma, but she had no notion of where the larder was. The girl waved her in the direction of a far door, and Amma thanked her. She walked quickly across the kitchen, remembering to hold her head high, as the Queen Mother had advised her to do, ignoring the question of everyone in the kitchen. Then she found herself in the larder's doorway, and she stopped abruptly, blinking into the sudden darkness as her eyes adjusted. At last she could see her surroundings, though dimly, the bundles of spices hanging from the ceiling, the shelves of dried meats, the baskets of root vegetables, the heavy bags of flour. And there, way in the back of the larder, was the body of a woman, unmoving, collapsed upon the floor. Stunned, Amma took a moment to find her legs, but when she did, she rushed forward and dropped to her knees beside the fallen figure. Fabiana was, if it indeed was Fabiana, lay on her side, her back to Amma, her face obscured in shadow. Amma's hand hesitated, then dropped to Fabiana's shoulder and shook it. A garbled sound came from Fabiana, and she stirred, batting away Amma's hand. "A quick nap," she turned in her half-sleep. "Leave me be." Amma sat back on her heels, just sleeping then. She wondered if maybe she should tiptoe away and leave Fabiana to her rest, but the nagging question of why the girl was already so tired at this early hour moved her hand forward against. This time she shook Fabiana's shoulder hard. "You," Fabiana said, awake now, and she rolled over and sat up in one movement. Then she saw who had awakened her. The expression on her face, mouth widened into an O, her eyes huge, made Amma laugh in spite of herself. "Lady," Fabiana said, "I thought you were someone else." "Yes," Amma answered, "that much I gathered." Fabiana made to stand up, but Amma stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Wait," she said, "I want to ask you something." Fabiana stayed as she had been bidden to do. Her white headscarf was askew from sleep. Her dark tendrils of hair escaped from it prettily. It was no wonder that Emery liked this girl, Amma thought. Embarrassed as she was, she posed the question she had come to ask. "I know that King Emery has visited you," she began. A smirk spread across Fabiana's face, bringing a blush to Amma's cheeks. "'Tis my pleasure to please my king," Fabiana answered. "Is it?" said Amma. Fabiana's brow gathered, confused. "I mean to say," said Amma, "and I am genuinely interested to know the truth, if you would be so generous as to answer me." "Answer what?" said Fabiana, and her tone, belligerent though it was, encouraged Amma forward. "Is it truly your pleasure to please the king?" There was another moment of confusion before Fabiana's face cleared. "Do I like it, you mean? When the king climbs me?" "Yes," breathed Amma, relieved. "Do you enjoy it?" "Who would not?" Fabiana said. "To be measured by the king's yard is a pleasure and a privilege both." "But," struggled Amma, "what is the pleasure? I mean to say, what does it feel like?" "The king's yard or the pleasure it gives?" Amma appreciated Fabiana's plain talk. "Both," she said. "Well, for the first, it feels all different ways. It can be a soft lump of warm dough, a handful of wrinkles in weight, and then it becomes a great thick horn, like a well-cooked leg of a turkey. And then down betwixt my legs it feels like, well, a key perhaps, or a poker to a fire. It stirs me up, it takes me apart, it makes me feel myself like a lump of warm, moist dough." She raised her eyebrow at Amma's clear discomfort. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" Amma cleared her throat. "Yes," she said, "I suppose." Then she said, "You know, I am to marry the king." Fabiana's expression turned to sour milk. "And you have come to tell me to stay away from my king." "No," said Amma quickly, "you misunderstand." Now Fabiana tilted her head, listening. "It is clear you find a pleasure with the king that I am well sure I am not capable of," Amma said, searching for the right words. "I thought that perhaps when it came to the king's yard, you and I could have an understanding." "What sort of understanding?" "Well, I imagine that I will have some duties I will not be able to avoid," Amma continued, "but as you seem to take pleasure in that which I will most likely just endure, I wanted to let you know that it would not be against my wishes if you continued to take visits from the king." There, she had said it. Fabiana blinked at her. "Lady," she said finally, "you are greatly mistaken if you think it matters one whit whether I find pleasure or pain with the king's yard, or for that matter whether or not you do. What matters only is my king's pleasure. You and I, whichever other girls take his fancy, we are all servants to that." She stood up, tucked the loose dark tendrils of her hair beneath her headscarf, and ran her hands down her king to smooth it. "Lady," she said, with a look of pity so unmistakable that Amma cast her gaze down from it, "if you cannot find pleasure with my king, I suggest you at least find a way to appear to do so. Otherwise you risk his wrath. A man's wrath can be mightier by far than his yard."